My guest in this week's episode of Suds Search is Aleyda Solis, founder at Orainti. Aleyda was awarded the 2018 European Search Personality of the Year at the European Search Awards. Aleyda is a popular conference presenter and frequent keynoter. She has presented at over 100 conferences in 20 countries, presenting in both English and Spanish. For my money, she is one of my favorite presenters in the industry. You may have heard her present at SMX, MozCon, Pubcon, Women in Tech SEO, and Brighton SEO. Aleyda is the creator of the popular newsletter SEOfomo. When she launched it, SEOfomo took the SEO industry by storm. I'll ask Aleyda a little about the newsletter during our conversation. She is the host of the popular video series Crawling Mondays. The series has amassed an impressive subscriber total and features conversations between Aleyda and some of the top SEOs in the world. She is also the creator of LearningSEO.io, an SEO learning roadmap with the best videos, blog posts, and online training courses for different topics in SEO. As you would expect with anything from Aleyda, it's extremely comprehensive. Aleyda has a wide breadth of expertise, but one of the topics I learned from her was international SEO. Whenever a website is appealing to audiences in several different countries, speaking different languages, it presents numerous challenges from an SEO perspective. Aleyda has become the world's leading expert on international SEO, and I start our conversation asking her a few questions about it. Join me for a conversation with Aleyda Solis. We'll chat about future-proofing your international SEO, tips and suggestions for video SEO, and I'll ask her a little about starting the hottest newsletter in SEO. Aleyda Solis, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
Very good, very good. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be able to finally be able to share with you.
No, I'm really looking forward to this one. You're a big get for Suds Search, and I want to talk to you about a lot of things. But first, I learned pretty much everything I know, which isn't that much about international SEO, from you. So before Search Lab, I got put on an assignment. It was like a project to do international SEO, and I didn't really know anything. And so I had to kind of fake it until I made it. And I carried around blog posts from you like they were users' manuals. To try and make sure I knew how to do this. You know, I want to ask you several questions about international SEO, but maybe a really good open-ended one is, what are some common reasons someone would need an international SEO?
Well, I would say that the first reason is to expand, right? And I have seen actually this happen a lot last year with COVID. That was one of the ways that many businesses did to expand and diversify a little bit their earnings, right? And last year, I think it was a year in which many businesses opened their eyes to the global opportunity. They realized that there was quite an opportunity out there. Even companies, and this took my attention a lot. Even companies that for me it would have been so straightforward for them to realize this before, but because of the way that the lockdown influenced the purchase behavior and the search behavior of many people, they ended up realizing how huge it was. So, for example, online courses, online learnings. I got this company that, yes, they had their international versions, multilingual versions already for a while out there, but pretty much implemented in a way that was just like an extrapolation of what they already had in English, right? But not realistically having taken care of an actual research, identifying search behavior in each market, really optimizing the offering for each market, making the most out of the opportunities there, etc. And all of a sudden, they got all this boom in traffic and conversions from these markets from which they never had much of an expectation, right? So pretty much they came to me and say, okay, now we're seeing the potential, we want a proper strategy, we want to really make the most out of this, right? And like this across many other businesses, for example, very well-known online invoicing tool, project management software. I have quite a few SaaS businesses that they realize, oh my God, they're remote work also, right? Productivity apps, software, collaboration software. So yeah, I think that indeed, potentially one of those very few positive outcomes from last year and COVID was this, right? A lot of businesses opened their eye for the international market.
Makes perfect sense. So let's say I'm one of those businesses. I am ready to expand, and I want to have an international site with a bunch of different language variations. I know the very first thing that, it'd be like chapter 1 of the textbook on international SEO is this HTML attribute href lang. What is href lang, and why is it important to international SEO?
Yeah, so this is the thing. I think that href lang is very popular, not necessarily for the right reasons, right? It's like pretty much is because it's so unnecessarily complex to implement. And realistically, a lot of people also think that implementing href lang should be like the first thing to do. And by implementing href lang, you're like almost there.
You've done it. Yeah, right.
But realistically not, right? Like, in fact, I will say that very much href lang annotation shouldn't necessarily be a concern only if you really have like an overlay type of issue. So for example, let's say that you have a web version targeted to the US and another to the UK and another in Canada, and then you see your Canadian pages ranking in the UK instead of the proper UK ones, or the UK pages ranking in the US instead of the right US pages. So in these sort of scenarios is that href lang annotations is so useful, because you pretty much pair your pages, your product A for the UK, product A for the US, product A for Canada, and you pair this different variations or different alternate versions of product A pages for your different markets, and to notify Google or inform Google which is the right one that they should show for the relevant country that you're targeting, right? So href lang solve this type of issues. So, but for example, if you have pages that are unique for a market and are not replicated across market because maybe your offering for this market is unique, or you have, let's say, like inventory that is changing all the time, and the products, again, if you're a marketplace or are in commerce, sometimes the products are not necessarily the same per market. So in this type of scenarios, href lang annotation pretty much it's a non-problem, right? It is, and a lot of websites, it's painful to see that they go through all of these headaches trying to implement href lang annotation there, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to try to do it so. Only maybe in the home pages or main category pages that are actually replicated across the different markets, it does make sense. When you are targeting actually different languages instead of targeting different countries sharing the same language also, is less of an issue, because pretty much the queries that you will be trying to rank across the markets will be different because of the different languages. Maybe branded terms, right, that will be very similar or the same across markets. But again, these are circumstances in which href lang annotations is actually not the main concern. I will say that the building blocks will be the actual stages to start with. Is like, first, to identify which are the markets, international markets that you want to target, and how do you want to do it. So whether language or country targeting. And this is the thing. Usually, with everything in SEO, it depends, right? There's no rule of thumb. So for example, if you have, let's say, an e-commerce website, it's very likely that you will need to end up to need to target countries, because it makes sense because of the business model. When you sell goods, these goods will very likely change in a non-trivial way per market because of the delivery conditions, the pricing conditions. Also, you will need to tackle and address purchase behavior that might be different across markets, and also depending, and this is pure luck, right? Depending on what products or goods or industry you are, maybe you're in some type of area in which the product names terms change completely between markets. So for example, pants versus trousers.
Sure.
Right? Even if the product is the same, right? Or for example, if you're in the property market, like apartments versus flats, right? Or car rental, car hire, car rental, like there might be different terms variations. So this is very obvious in some markets. So for example, if you're, again, car rental or apartment rental, these are very tied to the location. So you pretty much need to have like country versions. But there are others in which it's not so straightforward. So for example, even if it is in the same, let's say, business model. So again, I have had a few SaaS clients in the last few years. And an example of this is like for invoicing software. This usually will target countries because the software itself, the functionalities will be very tied to the specific country to which it is offered because taxes, currencies, right? So invoicing software for the UK, the type of laws regarding invoicing, taxes, conditions, etc., will vary per country. And for the UK will be and some of the integrations that they offer to connect with banks, to connect with local authorities or whatever, to comply with laws, whatever, will change per country. On the other hand, another SaaS product, but that doesn't have this reliance on the country, is project management. You go and take a look at project management software, they pretty much target languages, not country, because their offering doesn't change per country. The functionality is the same. It doesn't make sense for them to enable different country versions because pretty much they offer the same independently of your country. The offering will be the same, right? The product is the same. And on the other hand, if you validate, if you do a keyword research, and here comes the importance of the second stage of the process will be to identify and validate the search behavior of the market and demand in each market. You will see that pretty much the terms connected to project management across English-speaking countries will be very similar. The terms, they don't change much between countries. It's not like project management software and then project management system used only in certain countries. No, they are like very blended, very similar across countries. So again, it's supply and demand. There's a lot of supply and demand type of criteria here to select if you need to target countries or languages. And once that you sort that out, and also another important criteria here to take into consideration is like maybe you identify that you actually need to target countries, but then you identify that the demand in that country is very little to compensate like an actual operation there. This happens a lot across Latin American countries. Like there's so many of them, right? But a few of these countries like are very small. So you will tend to see this behavior, right? Like, you have for Latin America, you will have your Mexican version, your Argentina version, your Colombia version for the bigger countries. But then you see Central America because these are very, very small countries. So it doesn't make sense. Even if the terms change across them, it doesn't make sense for you to do all this investment in localization, content, etc., because it won't compensate at the end of the day. So again, so many different types of, for me, half of the effort should be that, because once that you have a good targeting, that you know that there's enough traffic demand, you identify the search behavior, you know how to optimize your content for those countries, you have the way there pretty much, because then all the configuration, the technicalities of it, they only need to try to replicate or to reflect what you have already identified in your research. And the main problem that I see across clients and companies that they don't do this research first, and then they come up with, oh my God, I have all of this 200 countries and markets and all of this mix between them. They have a EU version, but they also have a version for each EU country. So they are there's this misalignment going on and content duplication issues, and they don't know how to optimize each one or which is the one that they should target to each, because of the lack of this initial validation, right? And this is where the mess comes from, or the typical thing of like, I know that I should optimize the content of each of the country versions or language versions for their market, but I don't have resources for that. Well, you end up in that scenario because you haven't actually done the assessment at the beginning, only starting and prioritizing those markets where there's actual opportunity for you. Sure. And the effort will be compensated, because if you had done that, well, you wouldn't have this issue at this point, right? So yes, this is why it's so important. Yeah.
Well, I am still learning everything I know about international SEO from you. So that was an amazing answer. I wanted to kind of talk about actually implementing one of these campaigns that you do. So I would imagine an operation that's big enough to need an international SEO is pretty big. A lot of stakeholders, a lot of people with access to the website. You mentioned that you want to kind of set up a system that can be replicated many times. I wonder if after you've done an international SEO audit or you've done some consulting project, if it's hard to kind of future-proof that work, to make sure that it continues after you're gone, or it continues, that the stakeholders continue to do what you've recommended for them. Is that an issue you find? And can you give any tips for future-proofing your international SEO?
Yeah, so I think it is like you can define criteria, minimum criteria. Let's say, like, if you have done an analysis and you have done already the initial configuration and initial recommendations that have implemented, like establishing these rules and checklists to use in the future whenever a new page is published.
Right.
Whenever a new page is published in this market, like, let's not assume that it needs to be automatically replicated like this across all of the other markets, because this is the typical thing that we also see across international websites, like because a page is published in the CMS in English, automatically that URL exists across all others. It is simply no index, but this is how you end up with a lot of crap to crawl across different versions, or even content duplication issues, right? Okay, done by default, enable it across other countries, but validate if this product will actually make sense to sell, or this content actually makes sense to feature across all of the other countries. And if so, it needs to go through a workflow of keyword research, content localization, taking into consideration the terms, etc., etc. So yes, it's important to establish criteria to make sure that the content is enabled or not. Not because it exists in one country means that it will exist exactly like that in the others. Right. And then, of course, criteria to make sure that this content is not just like this exact same in English, but pretty much like automatically translated. No, but that in order to leverage the opportunity with that offering in those markets, you actually follow a workflow to make sure that it is effectively optimized, using the right terms, connect with the right preferences, etc., right? So yes, steps should be established to make sure that, like, you don't let's say, like, throw into the garbage whatever you have done in the past, but those rules that you follow for the initial implementation and recommendations, they are kept into whatever new page or content or product is launched across the markets, right? So these rules should be followed in the future too. Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense.
But yes, what you mentioned before regarding a lot of stakeholders having to now be aligned and approve all of this 100%. Yes. And this is certainly a complexity of this sort of projects, and because it needs approval. And we know that this depends a lot also, of course, of how complex is the organization, right? But we know that for many of the companies that will end up needing more of international SEO sort of support, these are companies that even have offices spread across the world, and people who are like the actual owners of the products in each office, local offices. So for them having to like give a little bit of their power, right? To this team of SEOs, or saying yes, or acknowledging that they need to integrate this sort of criteria within their own workflow, or align themselves into a bigger layer of rules or whatever. Like, yeah, it needs a lot of investment and good coordination, and the biggest the organization it is, and more spread out it is, and if there's a lot of bureaucracy, of course more work will be needed in that regard.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Well, what a challenge you have there. I wonder if this is sort of a question that came to me. Are you using the exact same tools that a normal, like, SEOs like me use? Are you using Hrefs and all the Google Search Console and Screaming Frog and all of those? Or are there actual, like, international SEO tools that you use every day?
No, really. I mean, all of the tools that we all use nowadays have multi-country sort of features, and I love it because, of course, like back in the day, it was not really like this, right? Like a lot of tools, especially when they start, they are very English-speaking focused, but keyword research tools, that most of them, SEMrush, Href, Systrix, so the major tools, they have multilingual, multi-country features. Then crawlers, you can crawl whatever type of website you want, and they have the hreflang validation too. Like content tools also. You see more content tools like Phrase or Surfer that takes into consideration also the relevance of the content and connection of the content from a semantic perspective to the query that you want to target. And yes, they have multilingual capabilities too, and they take into consideration international SERPs. So it's nice to see how more and more tools that exist in the market, they integrate all of these multilingual, multi-country sort of features. And I think it is because that, like maybe back in the day, 10 years ago, a lot of the tools were coming from the US. So they were very US and English speaking centric. But nowadays, like half of the tools that I have mentioned here, or even more, they are from Europe or Asia or other markets, right? Okay. So I think that more and more the people developing these tools, they acknowledge, and also they are aware of the power of and how much there is out there to target, right?
Makes perfect sense. Well, very interesting. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. You came out with a newsletter. I want to say it's somewhat recently. It was maybe the beginning of this year, but once this newsletter came out, it kind of took SEO Twitter by storm. Everybody was talking about it, and it's very well done. I wonder, with all that you have going on, and it's quite a lot that you have going on, why'd you decide to do a newsletter?
Because this is the thing, right? I actually started SEOfomo, the newsletter, at the beginning, not of this year. It feels like if it was this year, because for me, this is the COVID year. Like it started since COVID started till today. But no, it was at the beginning of 2020 that I retook it. In 2015, 2016 or so, I started a newsletter. At that time, it was like Aleyda SEO tips, whatever. I was inconsistent. I sent 4 newsletters in 1 year or something like that. So at the end, I had, I think, 1,200 subscribers. So at the beginning of 2020, I say, okay, I need to test this out and see if I can grow this newsletter by being consistent and delivering something, a mix of something different and also more comprehensive of what I was seeing already out there. And also saw the power of newsletter. I was reading more and more of people saying stuff like, oh, I will trade 10,000 followers in Twitter for 1,000 subscribers to my newsletter, because the power of a newsletter is much more of bottom of the funnel in your funnel, right? Because these are people that are much more engaged to what your share, right? And through this channel. So anyway, I wanted to test it out, and I realized that the easiest way for me to do that was to do this sort of coverage of the latest and best of what was happening in the SEO world, and then started to blend a little bit of a mix of top SEOs to follow, or top 3 tools to take a look at, right? And top remote SEO jobs, which was a great overlay because I have also a remote working website or hub that is called Remoter, so I already had that information there. So it was for me a great way to to blend a lot of my interests and to come up with something that I consider to be unique and specifically useful for people to be subscribed to. And I was quite happy to see how it started to grow, right? I started with 1,200 or so. Right now, my goal actually at the end of last year was to finish with 10K subscriber. It didn't happen because realistically, I realized when I was before the mid-year, right, that I wasn't yet at the 5K subscriber. So I did this giveaway, which was crazy. I ended up aggregating and getting the sponsorship of SEO tools. So at the end, I gave away 21K worth of SEO tools to reach the 5K subscribers. I ended up reaching the 5K subscribers, but it was already, I think it was in July or something like that. But then I was trying to come up with another way to incentivize more subscribers, but I ended up doing it at very late in the year with a referral system. And it took so long because it took a lot for me of time to find like the right system, the right software to do it. At the end, I ended up identifying Spark Loop, which is great, by the way. I can highly recommend. And yes, this is the one that I'm using. And so I have this referral system that if you refer to subscribers, I will give you a shout out. 5 subscribers, I will include you in a section in SEOfomo saying thank you. If you refer 15, you will get access to 3 videos, how-to videos that are exclusive that I film. If you refer 35, you will receive a mug. 100, you will receive a hoodie and a one-on-one call with me. And now because I have already 3 people who have reached the 100, I have said already, like at the next tier of prizes, which is 500, will be like a backpack, nice. Like a 2-hour consultation and something else. I don't even remember because nobody has reached that point. So very looking forward to people to reach that point. At this point, SEOfomo has 11,328 subscribers right now. I'm actually seeing it in my here. And so 11,328 subscribers. So I am very happy. And actually, I have to say something. It's one of those things that I am like so surprised to see how useful it is. People replying me, saying me, oh, it's so useful. Is how I am able to keep up in SEO. And realistically, selfishly, it also helps me because this is actually something that helps me to keep up with so much that happens in our sector, right? So it's sort of a win-win. And then also all of a sudden I started to get requests from SEO tools and even agencies, etc., like asking me, how can I sponsor your newsletter? So it's even profitable. So yeah, it's good. I cannot.
That's awesome,
yeah, it's good.
Well, great. I wonder if this is kind of a trend for you. I heard you speak at SMX West right before. That was like the last conference I went to before everything shut down. And you were talking about this video series that you had created in 19 and spent like a year analyzing that video series, and that is Crawling Mondays, which is a very popular podcast / video series. Our own Greg Gifford has appeared on it, and many of the top SEOs. It's similar to this one, but you also have times where you're alone talking about covering some topic in SEO. Tell our audience a little bit about Crawling Mondays and what they might find there.
Yes, so thank you for asking. Yes, indeed. Like what I try to do is like each year I have like a sort of a goal, something new to try, to test. And so, it was SEOfomo. Then before it was Crawling Mondays, which I sort of pivoted a little bit at the beginning of last year because actually 2019 was all full of how-tos, right? SEO how-tos. With me like showing how I implemented the plan or how I analyze rankings drop after Google update, things like that, very like actionable how-tos. So at the beginning of last year, I realized that with COVID lockdown, etc., I could leverage Crawling Mondays to have these sort of conversations like the ones that we're having right now, but topic focus with SEOs who were going to be like much more focused on that area than even myself, right? So for example, with Greg, I spoke about local SEO with him and another local SEO. So I have editions for e-commerce SEO, even if I do e-commerce SEO myself. For me, it was amazing to have all the very e-commerce focused SEOs to talk only about that topic, pros and cons, top issues, challenges, etc. So the same with every topic like SaaS SEO or international SEO, or we had one of enterprise SEO, link building, page speed. So I pick up a topic and then I invite a couple of SEOs who I know who are very, very into this topic. And we have a discussions like going through that particular topic to like highlighting what people actually need to know or to be aware of when implementing for that specific area, right? And so it was great. It was also a good excuse to keep talking with SEO colleagues and friends who I was not able to see because of the lack of traveling and conferences, right? So it was also a win-win, and then with the conversations like this, which I couldn't do with the how-tos, right? I started to generate podcasts because this is very straightforward with Anchor, for example. In Anchor, which actually was bought by Spotify some time ago, you pretty much just drop the MP4 file and it will generate a podcast for you. So it's great because you can easily repurpose your video, right? So this is one thing that I have started to try tested since last year, right? Like the video that you publish as a video series, you can also easily repurpose as a podcast and distribute through, in this case, I use Anchor, which I will highly recommend for this, and is free to use too. So it's like another win-win-win-win in my case, and it's something that I actually enjoy because of that. And then I can highly recommend, if you're doing that, and if you try to do that, I can also highly recommend. There is a video editor that I have been using already for a few months that is called Descript, that has literally changed my productivity with video edition, because you pretty much drop the MP4 that you have recorded. It will automatically generate the transcriptions for you, and then you can edit the video but editing the transcription. So it's like if you were editing, let's say, a blog post, and you dislike this whatever phrase you say, or the whatever, right? And you edit it in the text, and it will automatically edit the video for you. So you don't need to go through the timeline of the video looking to what to edit and match or whatever. No. The tool does it for you. So it's mind-blowing. I highly recommend that, because that has literally changed my productivity regarding the video edition and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I dig it. And I mentioned at the beginning just how many things you have going on. There's one more I want to touch on before I let you go. This website, learningseo.io, where you've curated kind of the top blog posts, video series, webinars, etc., about every topic you can think of in SEO. So it takes it from very basic things like how a search engine works, or maybe keyword research, all the way to how to automate SEO tasks with Python or BigQuery. What if our audience with it? What are people liable to find at learningseo.io, and how frequently are you updating? This is a pretty big undertaking that you've taken on?
Yeah, so learningseo.io, search for it. It is. I was actually checking the rankings a couple of days ago, and I see that in some countries, not in the US yet, but in the UK is already position 9 for Learn SEO. So little by little, yes, not bad. So I started it literally a month ago or so. After honestly, I'm very active in Twitter, and you know that I publish a lot. And this is the typical question that I get all the time. How can I start on SEO, or how do you recommend? I want to learn more about internal linking. Which resources do you recommend? Or I want to learn more about this and that. Which resources would you recommend? So for me, it was honestly, I cannot keep up, but I'm trying to answer all of these random questions, right? So for me, it's I wish I had this hub with resources that I could refer to that were nicely structured in a way that anybody who wants to, whether to learn about everything or just to go to a specific area, learn about a specific area in SEO, they can easily do it if they want. And then so and then also another of my, let's say, issues that I see all the time is if you try and want to start learning, let's say if we were starting in SEO right now nowadays, and you started following all of the main Twitter accounts or whatever, there's so much noise right now, or trending topics, not necessarily noise, because noise has this implication that it's not important. No, it's not that some topics are important, but the way that they are covered is very into, let's say, trends from time to time, and for someone who's just starting, it might seem that it's like 80% of the stuff that they need to learn, but no, it's realistically only 5% of the stuff that you need to learn, because of the impact in the final outcome. It's not necessarily that high, or doesn't play such a fundamental role as they would thought on. So, and then also, it also started because last year I had the opportunity to do a little bit of SEO mentoring through the Women in Tech SEO group, and it was this young SEO who was like, oh, I am starting to learn R or to automate things, whatever. And this SEO didn't even knew at this point HTML, and I was like, look, if you want to learn, if you're keen to learn about technical SEO and to code before trying to automate stuff and going through the our route, which is great, by the way, or our path, which is great, but before that you may want to better learn and understand the building blocks of the websites that you will be analyzing, right? So learn HTML. So this, but I could totally see why. It's because if you jump into Twitter and you see all of these topics jump in, you will pretty much like start learning about EAT or Python before even the fundamentals, because of all of the information that goes out there, which is because it's the trendy things to talk about, right?
Right, yeah.
So this was my intention, right? To clarify and to give like a more of like accurate picture of all of the building blocks in SEO, all of the different areas. Also that if you, let's say you're not technical oriented, it's more than okay, because there are so many other areas, like you have the building blocks, but you also, if you want to go into link building, you can't be okay without knowing how to code, right? Or if you're into content, you're more than okay without knowing how necessarily to do outreach, if you don't, something that you dislike. Also because I see these struggles also a lot of, but I don't know if I can be a good SEO if I cannot do this. Like, and the beauty of SEO is that there are so many different areas that you can develop yourself into, for so many different type of profiles, right? So hopefully all of that is, let's say, reflected into that roadmap, so people can see which are like the areas that you like will provide you a good base. But also, if you want to develop yourself across different sort of paths, you can do it so in so many different ways, and shows like, gives you a little bit of more accurate view of all of the different areas that play a role, and it's not 80% only that or 70% only that, because sometimes it feels just like this if you jump into Twitter SEO and SEO Twitter, right? Or in one of the major SEO blogs, right?
I completely agree. Yeah, and getting the fundamentals down is hard if you're just following everybody on Twitter. I think that's an excellent point. So I wonder, is this your 2021 project, or is it something else? You said that
yes,
SEOfomo was 20 and Crawling Mondays was 19. Is this year's project?
Well, actually, I am going to start using it as this year project. I have to say, I started it a month ago, and I have been updating it every week, and I intend to keep updating it. As much as possible, to keep it not only fresh with the latest, freshest resources, but also expanding it with more. So, for example, last week, there was people asking me about if I could include about SEO forecasting or log analysis for SEO, and I did. So I am including based on people's feedback and input, and I did a presentation last week about pretty much like developing soft skills to be able to effectively manage and navigate through SEO processes and complexity with stakeholders, getting things done, getting buy-in, this type of stuff. So I am definitely also going to expand it to include more of resources about soft skills for SEOs, and also there was another point of someone pointing me out, like, what if I am someone with a non-technical background but who wants to start with technical SEO? So I also expect to expand a little bit of more, let's say, technical resources for non-technical people, things like that. So I can see it to be expanded in so many different ways to fulfill more and more edge cases, because I think that the main use cases are already there, but also to keep it always fresh. Sure. And also, for example, there was another request, and I think that it actually has an important purpose, and potentially will be one of the next ones that I will be updating, like SEO myths, to clarify to people who are which are those SEO myths, like LSI keywords this type of things, right? So so I will definitely be focusing on this. I actually had another thing in mind for this year, but I can definitely see this to have so much impact on people, and having also so much opportunity to develop it in many different ways, that yes, I will definitely be promoting and expanding it much more.
Well, awesome. Well, this is everyone's favorite part of the show. This is where Greg Gifford gives me a question for our guest. I have no context for the question, so it's a bit of a high wire act for both of us. We don't really know what's going on. For you, this is more of a statement than a question, I would say. He just said that he's mad because your slides are always so gorgeous. And so I actually have some context to this one, but Greg is competitive about having the most beautiful slides. I know that. Do you know anything more about this statement he's given to me?
Well, yes. Well, actually, I have to say that I love Greg slides because they are so very cool. Always like pop culture oriented with movies and stuff. And I can see how he invests an untrivial time developing it. So yes, and we have also talked in the past about this topic, because yes, I tend to also I do my slides myself. Is one of those things that I actually enjoy doing. I don't delegate this, and yes, I try to do slides that are actually attractive, that have some sort of also not only good design, but also like use of memes and to connect with the audience. So it's potentially because of that too. And yes, what can I say? Thank you very much for the referring them as good looking slides. I try to I try that these are also slides that are easy to go through and easily understandable, even if you haven't been in the session, right?
No, I can vouch too. I've seen you present. Your slides are outstanding. So, well, Aleyda, thank you so much for coming on. You've been really generous with your time. I want to make sure if people want to reach out to you, there's I'm going to have to put 7 different links in the show notes here. We've got to cover your video series, your learning site. How do you like to be connected with, and what's the best way for people to reach you?
Yes, you can reach me through my own website, aleydasolis.com, or Orainti, which is my consultancy site, or over Twitter. I am also very active over Twitter. You can follow me at Aleyda.
Okay, great. Well, Aleyda, thank you so much for coming on. I think I'll sign off now with a virtual cheers. I hope to see you on the road at some point, maybe late 2021, maybe not till 22, but just means the world to us that you would come on. Keep doing just this amazing work that you've been doing, amazing presentations, amazing thought leadership. It's meant a lot to me throughout my career, and very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you very much. It means a lot, and thank you for the opportunity. I have had a great time sharing with you.
All right, likewise. All right, well, I'll sign off for now. We'll see you next week for Suds Search.